He required that communism, Nazism, political Zionism, and other international movements be organized and used to foment the 3 global wars and 3 major revolutions. The First World War was to be fought so as to enable the Illuminati to overthrow the powers of the Tsar in Russia and turn that country into the stronghold of atheistic communism. Did that happen?
Yes, sir.
The differences stirred up by the agentur of the Illuminati between the British and German empires were to be used to foment this war. After the war ended, communism was to be built up and used to destroy other governments and weaken religions. Did that happen?
Yes, sir.
World War II was to be fomented by using the differences between fascist and political Zionist. This war was to be fought so that Nazism would be destroyed and the power of political Zionism increased so that the sovereign state of Israel could be established in Palestine. Did that happen? During World War II, international communism was to be built up until it equaled in strength that of united Christendom. At this point, it was to be contained and kept in check until required for the final social cataclysm. That's the ashes, rising up from the ashes. Can any informed person deny Roosevelt and Churchill did not put this policy into effect? No, they can't. Now remember now, here's a man writing about something, William Guy Carr, the researcher, writing about something that was happening in the 1800s. Satan said to the Lord, the kingdoms of this world I'll give to you if you'll just fall down and worship me. The only reason why their plans may not come to complete fruition is because he that now letteth will let till he be taken out of the way. Do you want to hear what World War III is about? World War III is to be fomented by using the differences the agentur of the Illuminati stir up between, watch this, political Zionists and the leaders of the Muslim world. Now, if I didn't say another thing, you could get up and walk out of this house today and say, good night, man. They're doing it. They're doing it. Have you ever seen a time when Islam is such uproar as it is right now? The war is to be directed in such a manner that Islam, the Arab world, including Mohammedanism, political Zionism, including the State of Israel, will destroy themselves, while at the same time the remaining nations, once more divided against each other on this issue, will be forced to fight themselves into a state of complete exhaustion, physically, mentally, spiritually, and economically. Boy, let me see. If Israel is in a fight to the death struggle with Islam and the other nations of the world are aligning themselves one way or another, that would be a good time for a peacemaker to step in and make a covenant, wouldn't it? And Israel would be willing to sign a covenant of peace, knowing that they were at the precipice of destruction, right? Now, of course, this is not what Pike had in mind. What Pike had in mind is to destroy them, because he wants to bring in his new world order. But you see, God has a way of taking the plans of Satan and making them his own, because he directs it exactly the way he wants it. You following that? God is the only one that can overrule wickedness and deceit and bring it to his own purpose and bring it to fruition. If I didn't say any more to you this morning, you have to go home and ask yourself this question. How in the world, in the 1800s, did they know anything about a conflagration that would involve the Muslims with Israel? Wasn't even a state in the 1800s. Where did this line of thought come from? How could this be transmitted down through time? And yet this man, when he writes this, he writes this based upon his own personal research into this stuff. And he spent his lifetime reading everything he could get a hold of. And that's the conclusion he came to, that they were planning 3 world wars And the Third World War would involve the Muslim. Now, how many in this house this morning would have to say to yourself, you know, there could be a Third World War. And shucks, if Iran were to launch a nuclear weapon, boy, we could have a real war, couldn't we? And our illustrious president has handed them the kitchen so that they can build a nuclear weapon. Who knows? I've read some material. All we know is what we read. I'm not at the top up there talking with these guys. Some say they've already got a nuclear weapon. So who knows? I don't know. Listen to this. Albert Pike wrote a letter to Mazzini. And this letter was intercepted. And it is this letter to Mazzini that we're talking about here that's the most controversial thing in the world. Because here's what's said. This letter was supposed to have been on display in the British Museum or somewhere up in there. And Carr took the word of someone who had been there to see it and read it, and he authenticated his work based on that. And then, come to find out, the British Museum comes out now and says that the letter never existed. And hold on. How many of you have ever heard that people have found artifacts out here? Found artifacts, sent them to the Smithsonian Institute. How many of you have ever heard that the Smithsonian, if it's an artifact that does not support their evolution, they'll put it on a barge and send it out into the Atlantic Ocean and dump it? Yeah. Do you know who I'm going to believe? I'm going to believe the Christian. Do you know who I'm going to believe? I'm going to believe that trooper, that commander in the field in a heartbeat over a politician. You got to get to the point, folks, where just because they say it doesn't exist or this or that, remember who you're listening to. You can't trust anybody today. But if you know he's a born-again brother and your spirit witnesses with his spirit, you can trust him. That's like me. I'm up here preaching to you this morning. Can you trust me? Can you trust what I'm saying? You know, I don't get $500,000 a lecture. Wall Street, they've never invited me to come up and lecture Goldman Sachs. Nope, doesn't happen. Now, here's a quote from Pike. He says, "We shall unleash the nihilist, the atheist. We shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations of the effect of absolute atheism." Watch carefully this wording. "Origins of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will be from that moment without compass, direction, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view." Boy, let me put it in simpler terms. Pike is not an atheist. Atheism has been running rampant. He says that by bringing about this third world war, that he will show to humanity what atheism and agnosticism produces. They'll get the blame for it. And that the true faith in Lucifer, who is the true light, is the only salvation for man. And that people will be disillusioned with their church. They'll hate the whore, Revelation 17. They're disillusioned with the church. They're disillusioned with atheism. They're disillusioned with agnosticism. They're disillusioned with all of it, so they'll turn to Lucifer. Now, Lucifer doesn't have two horns. He doesn't have hooves on his feet. He doesn't carry a pitchfork. He's the most beautiful, wise one you ever met. You never met one who knows man like Lucifer and has the answer for your problems and for the problems of the world. And let me tell you how he shows up. He shows up in Pike and Mazzini's man. Their man will be energized by the power of Lucifer. the whole world will say we're sick and tired of wars. We're sick of wars. We're sick of killing. We're sick of atheism and agnosticism. That's what brought the war about. And you are going to lead us into an age of peace. That's what Pike is talking about.